Hi, folks. Kirby Obsidian back again to talk about Donald Trump and MAGA and what I feel like are really serious problems in a movement I think is very misguided. Now, there was an interesting comment on one of my last videos. The commenter said, uh, the Trump derangement syndrome is strong in this one. I guess kind of mimicking the Star Wars thing about the Force. TDR, Trump derangement syndrome. So my response to that was absolutely. Anyone who is sane and thinks for themselves is going to be a little bit deranged by Donald Trump. That's the way I see it. So I claim that proudly. I consider it a compliment. You know, as far as I can see, the only thing about Trump that I find appealing is that he doesn't sound like a standard politician. He has a way of just being straightforward and spontaneous, and I can understand the appeal of that. And I won't say that there's nothing Trump has ever done that I don't applaud. He has done a few good things, but by and large, I feel like he's taking our country down a really dangerous path. And as far as MAGA, I I I can't claim to understand MAGA. I'm quite disturbed by it. And one of the things that bothers me most about MAGA is how unfeeling it is, how little empathy uh, shows up in policies that MAGA supports. Now, I recognize that I'm generalizing. I've met a lot of Trump supporters and had dialogues with some Trump supporters that makes me see that they're good people, they're well-meaning people. But I think I mostly come up with just delusions and errors about facts, about what is. So I'm really disturbed at how MAGA seems to have a real disregard for who its policies might hurt, as in the case of these mass deportations that are sweeping up people, not only citizens in some rare instances, but people who, though not citizens, and may be here illegally, have contributed, who have families, who are but belong to a community that supports them. And there seems to be so little regard for these people being hurt. I was stunned when there was this backlash against Joe Biden trying to eliminate student debt. I just couldn't, so many of us regular people, members of MAGA, are have students who are being crushed by this debt. Why not offer them some relief? I was stunned and continue to be stunned by how Obamacare was so attacked, so ridiculed, as though there was something evil about offering medical care to regular people, and all types of false claims put out there about how damaging. And there's often this conflation of anything that serves people broadly is communist and harkens back to the old Soviet regime. Well, the fact is, communism and socialism aren't the same, and either of those forms manifest in lots of different ways. So that, believe it or not, we've had socialism in this country for quite some time. And examples of that are Social Security and Medicare, free education. These are all examples of socialist policies. They don't mean communist Soviet Union style dictatorship. Now, this lack of empathy, I have come to see as a characteristic of MAGA. And I'm not, I realize I'm generalizing here, so this absolutely doesn't apply to all individuals, but certainly to MAGA as a whole and to its leadership. I feel like there's this real sense of entitlement and superiority. Um, we're Americans. We're better than the rest of the world. We are Christians. We're better than the rest of the world. We have our American work ethic and all that. All sorts of criteria like that, identity criteria, I guess, and we use those to kind of separate ourselves and act as though those others do not matter. Their pain does not matter. And I see that reflected in the so-called Great Big Beautiful Bill, which, cuts the funding of Medicaid, which clearly is going to hurt a lot of regular people. But what the politicians are saying is, oh no, we're not cutting services to anyone who is deserving. We're cutting out the fraud. We're cutting out the waste. Now, I'm going to relate this for a bit to my own background. I spent most of my adult life working in social services. I worked in group homes, mostly for youth. I worked in a detention center for youth. I worked at a Job Corps center once, which is a federal program to train youth. I've worked in a lot of small nonprofit agencies, so working directly in communities. I worked for a university teacher education program, training teachers to work in public schools. I've worked in a homeless shelter. I've worked for the City of Toronto Streets to Homes program, which worked directly with homeless people, trying to get them housed. And I've spent a good bit of time working in middle schools primarily. Now, that's given me opportunities to work with a lot of different kinds of people, providing a lot of different kinds of services. When you talk about fraud and you ask me, is there fraud in social services? Yes, there is. There's a very small number of people who abuse social services, who use them when they're maybe not really entitled, who could be making their way if they took more personal responsibility. They could be supporting themselves. The most outstanding image that comes to my mind or memory is when I worked in a homeless shelter, and there was this shelter served meals, and I recall on 2 or 3 occasions having an individual come up to the window where food is dispensed, getting a plate of food, looking at it and saying, "Oh, that's nasty," and throwing it away. And the immediate reaction is, this person shouldn't be getting services, and so forth and so on. That's not just my reaction, but that's certainly the reaction of the other homeless people who are waiting to get that food. But a couple of things. First of all, these people are invariably really angry and who seem to be suffering from some type of mental illness, so that although I would gladly, let's say, withhold the immediate opportunity to get food if you're going to be disrespectful of this service, but that's not to say I would close the door on the person needing some mental health services. But the other thing is this: if you try to weed out people, you're going to invariably end up cutting off some people who do deserve the service, because people who manipulate the service and take advantage of it fraudulently are pretty good at finding loopholes and whatever. So if all the restrictions are upped and all the requirements are upped, yeah, you're going to get a few of those people who are committing fraud, but you're probably going to cut off a lot of people who are deserving at the same time. And we must keep in mind that this is a small number of people. I'm not someone who's been doing research on all this. I'm just speaking from my personal experience. But I would say it's something under 5% of people who are somehow manipulating the system to get services that they may not deserve. Now, the vast majority of people who I've worked with in all my social service experience are people who just need a bit of support. Maybe they are lacking the skills necessary to hold the job. Maybe they don't have the job skills in place. Maybe they have health issues, mental health issues, budgeting, a lack of the understanding of how to manage a budget. There are lots of ways that people can fall through cracks and end up needing some support. And they may need that support for a short while. They may need it for years. They may need it for a lifetime. But generally speaking, if that support is provided, then it puts that person in a position where they can have a stable life, where they can then perhaps have a job and be contributing to society, so they will not be a cost to the rest of society. They will be a net benefit. There's another group, which is another small group of people who are immensely skilled and immensely talented, who have fallen through the cracks, perhaps because of addiction or a mental health issue or some other some trauma in their lives. A lot of times it's some devastating event in someone's lives that pushes them to the streets or to jail or whatever. If services are provided to these people and they are able to get back on track, and not all of them will, there are a lot of people in all three of these categories who may never change, but a lot of them will change, and they can contribute, particularly people in that last category, the ones who are very skilled, very intelligent. They have a lot that they can give back. And in my working years, there have been a number of instances of people who were clients, often the most difficult clients, the ones who created the most upset or were most dysfunctional. I've seen a number of instances of those people turning their lives around and becoming social service providers. I've had a person working in the same program I work with, Streets to Homes program, who was previously homeless, is now helping other people to get off the streets. There was a youth in a program I worked with who was just so disruptive and always causing disturbances and never listening to anything. None of us would have ever thought he was going to amount to anything. A few years later, he's not only in university, he's a youth leader being mentored by the head of a private agency with just a great future ahead of him. So here are the reasons why I talk about this. For one, contributing part of our budgets to serve these people, it's not costing us. In the long run, it benefits us because, and here's one quick but clear example. If you have a homeless person, sleeping in a park, it's next to impossible for that person to find employment. They're not presentable. Homeless people, it's amazing how much effort they have to go through just to find a place to clean themselves or to be able to use toilet facilities. So a person like that is far from a position where they can turn things around. You put out the money to get that person an apartment, and studies show, there have been a lot of studies on this, immediately their interactions with police come way down. Their use of emergency rooms and other emergency services comes way down. They start to look at ways to deal with their addictions, their mental health, etc., etc., etc. So when you look at the outlay for providing the housing services, that's way less than what is saved by the services that go out to dealing with people on the street and the other disturbances they cause to people in their immediate environment. So it's to our benefit to help people in need, to be open to hearing them express what it is that's holding them back. Now, another thing that has become really clear to me is that the mentality of those in the social services who like throw the food away and are screeching about how fucked up the services are and how they don't get what they need, that mentality is so similar to the mentality I perceive in those leaders of MAGA, screaming about what is wrong, what is hurting them, what they're not getting that they deserve, bad-mouthing everything that stands in their way. And the prime example of that is MAGA's leader, Donald Trump. Is there anyone in recent history who's been more of a whiner, who talks more about woe is me, how I'm being mistreated, who takes so little responsibility for what he has done, for the laws he has broken, like in the case of January 6th, who is willing to liberate people who attacked police and champion them regardless of what harm they might perpetrate when, upon release back in society. So I see MAGA as suffering under some real delusions about the nature of our society, the kinds of services that are really important and that help our society, and being really deluded about things like fraud and waste and just this whole notion, for example, that immigrants are poisoning the blood of America and are responsible for so much crime, when any study you look at will show you that this is simply not the case. So probably my biggest source of confusion about MAGA and problems with MAGA is my struggle to understand how so many people are working so hard against their own self-interest. Why are so many people against health care that benefits them, against social service programs that benefit them, against working to help immigrants adapt and have a pathway to citizenship, when their participation in our society all through American history has been so beneficial to us. Why do you allow yourselves to be so frightened when the leaders come up with all these bogus claims and lies about these programs being destructive to your interests? That's the thing that baffles me most about MAGA, and it's so sad. Get woke. Woke is actually a good thing. It means becoming aware of.